Okay guys, you ready for some great historical fiction book recommendations? Let's get into it. And I'm also going to have a couple of other recommendations that have nothing to do with historical fiction. Well, I guess one of them could technically be categorized as historical fiction, but you know, maybe not. But they are juicy books, so I'm gonna talk about those as well because I think they might be something that you want to pick up. And I am going to try to focus on books that I haven't really talked about on this channel all that much just because I don't want it to be too repetitive, except for this first book that I'm going to recommend, and that is A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. I know it's a book that was written a long time ago, but I don't tend to focus that much on new releases. It's interesting that I never actually picked up this book because I absolutely adored The Kite Runner. The Kite Runner is one of my favorite books of all time, and A Thousand Splendid Suns is equally as good, if not better. But ultimately, Khaled Hosseini, he is just such an unbelievable storyteller. Just the characters that he creates, they just become alive, right? They become alive to you. This is a story about Afghanistan, similar to The Kite Runner, except this one focuses on the lives of two women. Similar time period as The Kite Runner, it talks about Afghanistan when it was under Soviet occupation, all the way up to the disbanding of the Taliban the first time. Anyways, if you've never read that book, if you've never picked it up, it's so good. I cannot recommend it enough, but it is a very hard book. I actually did try to read it a long time ago, but I was pregnant at the time, just a little bit too emotional. It's a hard book, so you do have to know that going into it. Another great historical fiction book that I recently read was In Memoriam by Alice Wynne. Now, somebody recommended this to me on this YouTube channel. Basically, they said that because I loved Birdsong so much, so Birdsong is a World War I historical fiction novel, that I should check out In Memoriam. I would definitely agree that they are similar in tone, similar in ethos. I would say Alice Wynne really captured World War I. She captured that era. I've done a lot of just nonfiction research on World War I. I read a lot of books about it, read a lot of personal accounts from people who experienced it, and she captured it. It was a beautiful book. It was so well written. And essentially the plot of the story, it was about two soldiers, two upper-class soldiers, so they're from the English upper class. One of them is half German, and they happen to be secretly in love with one another. And it's sort of, you know, their story with the war as well as their story with each other. But it was a beautiful, beautiful book. I really, really enjoyed that. And if you are the person who recommended this book to me, thank you very much. So another historical fiction author that I've been hearing a lot about, and I did try one of her books, and her name is Amy Harmon. I tried her book, What the Wind Knows. It's basically a story about the Irish Revolution, so essentially Easter Rising, and then, you know, how Ireland sort of goes on this long, years-long tale in terms of finally extricating itself from the British Empire. It has a time travel element as well in it. It's a love story as well. I really enjoyed this book. I wouldn't say this book like blew me away or anything like that. I certainly didn't enjoy it as much as A Thousand Splendid Suns, but that's not really saying much because there are few books that I've enjoyed as much as A Thousand Splendid Suns. But I'm actually really looking forward to reading Amy Harmon's book Sand and Ash. This is another historical fiction book. This one takes place in World War II in Italy. Again, it's a love story. It's about a girl and a boy, and the boy actually becomes a priest.
Oh, excuse me, I totally got the description wrong in the original video I did. This book is actually ultimately a book about the Holocaust because the main female character is actually a member of the Jewish community, and she is hidden by Angelo, who is Catholic. He's a Catholic priest. She's hidden in a convent, and it's sort of like that whole story about that, as well as other members of the Jewish community who the Catholic Church is also hiding.
The only thing about What the Wind Knows is that I did listen to it on Audible, and I just thought it was a little weird that they chose American actors for the narration because the characters were Irish. Well, technically the main character was American, but then she, you know, traveled back in time to Ireland. So I guess she could have been American, but the guy that they chose for the narration was an American guy who's actually a narrator that I really like. I've really liked some of the books that he's narrated, but I just thought it was kind of weird because you could tell that it was a fake Irish accent. I don't know. But that was my only real criticism of that book. I did enjoy it. Another historical fiction book recommendation that I am looking forward to is Codename Verity by Elizabeth Wein. Now this is a World War II spy novel. It's about two women. I've definitely heard about this book many, many times, and sort of what put it over the edge for me to put it on my TBR in terms of not my, you know, 2,000 book long TBR, but actual TBR of books that I'm probably most likely going to get to this year is because because somebody did recommend it to me on this book channel. At least what I've found from this YouTube channel is that if somebody actually does comment on a book that they think I would like, it usually does end up happening that I do like it because they've actually taken the time to watch my videos. So that means that I must have taste that's similar to theirs. So it's just kind of worked out, and that's honestly the reason that I started this YouTube channel, because I wanted to sort of like build a community of people that had similar taste in books so that we could recommend books to one another and we could, you know, read books that we actually like, and it wasn't so much just trying things out, right? You know, it's not a shot in the dark every time you pick up a book, right? So I'm definitely looking forward to Codename Verity. Now, the next historical fiction book that I am very much looking forward to is Go as a River by Shelley Reed. Now, from what I can tell, this is one of those books that kind of, if you know what it's about, it's kind of like ruining the book for you. So the description of the book is a little bit vague, and I've read some of the reviews on Goodreads, the ones without spoilers, and those are kind of vague too. So I'm kind of assuming that you don't really know what it's about until you've actually read the book. But again, this one has come highly recommended to me from people that have commented on this YouTube channel. All I really know about it is it's about Colorado in the late 1940s and onward. It's about a woman who grows up on a peach farm, or I guess the correct word is peach orchard, and then it has something to do with somebody who's a member of the indigenous population and sort of their relationship and then what happens. That's all I can really gather from the descriptions, but this book does come highly recommended, so I'm definitely very much looking forward to reading this one. Now, another one that I'm really looking forward to, and I totally forgot that I actually used an Audible credit a really long time ago to purchase this one, and that is The Godfather by Michael Puzo. So I don't know if technically it's historical fiction. I guess you probably could say it's historical fiction. And the way that this book really came on my radar is there was actually a show on HBO about the making of The Godfather, the movie. And I had no idea that The Godfather was actually based on a book. I had literally no idea that it was a book. So that's why I went to my Audible, I used one of my credits to buy the book, and then I never listened to it. You know, I'm sure you guys are familiar, right? So I've got this one on Audible already. It's definitely a classic. I'm definitely very much looking forward to this one. I'm very curious about it because in reality, I'm actually like not that big of a fan of Mafia stories. I don't know, I guess it's just not my genre, but I guess if you're gonna go with the ultimate Mafia story, right? Like if you're gonna go with a genre, like the Mafia genre, you might as well go with the one that started it all, right? Now let's talk about the two books that aren't really historical fiction, but I think that you're going to like, well, at least I think you're going to really, really like the first one I'm going to talk about, and then the second one, I definitely think it's a great pick for a book club. So if you run a book club, this one would be ripe for discussion. There's so much to talk about with this book, but let's talk about the first one, and that is Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. So no spoilers here. I'm just going to sort of give you a little overview of the book. Essentially what happens is there is a woman who is looking out her window one day and she notices her son. Her son has just turned 18, and then she sees him, she watches him committing a murder. And then the book sort of spins into this time travel story. She basically starts finding herself going back in time, trying to pinpoint the spot where whatever happened to create this murder, this sort of sequence of events, she has to stop it. Now, I know this is a Reese Witherspoon pick, and I don't know, how you guys feel about that. I definitely think the Reese Witherspoon book club is hit and miss for sure, but she has picked some really good books. I mean, I will give her that. She's picked some fantastic books, and I would say that this is definitely up there in terms of some of the books that she's picked that are absolutely fantastic. First of all, I think that the way that this book came together in terms of the time travel element was very well written, very well thought out. In terms of the rules, I actually really like time travel stories, but I do think that sometimes time travel stories can be irritating if the author doesn't do a good job in creating the rules, right? The rules within the book of the time travel. And I think Gillian McAllister did a really good job. But then the reason why I really, really liked this book is it wasn't just all plot driven. It was very much character driven and plot driven. It had a very fast paced plot, which I like, but also it had great characters, and I thought ultimately it was a really, really touching portrait of what it means just to be a human being. So if you haven't tried that one, I would definitely recommend picking it up. And then the next one, the book club pick that I've sort of singled out here is The Rachel Incident by Carolyn O'Donoghue. Now it's funny because I actually wouldn't say that I enjoyed this book all that much. I listened to it on Audible and I actually did end up speeding it up a little bit because I just wanted to get through it. And I know that sounds kind of weird that I'm talking about that on my YouTube channel, but if you do have a book club, this would be a great book to talk about on this book club. There are lots of themes in this book. It's essentially about an Irish girl and her gay best friend during the recession in Ireland, and basically an incident, something that happens to them, and how Rachel sort of is thinking about what happened a long time later. Now it's interesting because I don't think that Rachel was likable in any way. I mean, I felt like she was very irresponsible. She just like was so self-absorbed and just would just make one bad decision after another. It's like, I mean, please, like, you're in your 20s, right? I mean, of course you're gonna be making bad decisions. Of course you're gonna be self-absorbed. Like, that's just what your 20s are for. But I felt like it was like a whole new level. But anyways, it wasn't just her. There was just so much stuff that you could talk about with regards to this book. And I did think it was a bit of a historical fiction book because it was talking about the Great Recession, you know, the 2008 crash and then everything that happened beyond it. I definitely vividly remember that crash. That crash definitely affected not only me, but my family like greatly. So it was interesting just to sort of like go through it again to see it from the Irish perspective, not just the US perspective. I know Ireland was hit really, really hard with that recession. But anyways, it's one of those juicy books that if you do have a book club, you could honestly be talking about this book for like hours and hours. Well, that's it. There's some great historical fiction book recommendations as well as a few others. Let me know in the comments down below if there's any of these books that you're going to plan on reading, and also let me know what are your book recommendations. I've gotten so many good book recommendations from people that have commented on this channel, so definitely let me know. What are some book recommendations that you recommend for historical fiction, or honestly anything? As long as it's not, you know, really, really crazy fantasy or science fiction with lots of like world building. I just don't like that. But anything else, you know, I'm game.